Good evening, good evening. What a terrific audience we have tonight. I can tell you the galleries are full upstairs too, and as the director of the Smithsonian American Art Museum, that brings joy to my heart, as I know it does to you. We want people looking at original objects. For those of you who do not know me yet, I'm Stephanie Stebish, and again, I have the pleasure of leading this institution as well as the Renwick Gallery. And you are in this spectacular McAvoy Auditorium in the old Patent Office building here in DC. And as we talk about place, I also want to acknowledge the diverse and vibrant Native American communities who make their home here in Washington, DC, as well as the Native peoples whose ancestral homelands were gathered on, as well as the labor of people who were enslaved in constructing the museum's historic buildings. So again, beginning with place. We are gathered for a terrific program and special event. This is the 34th Annual Charles C. Eldredge Prize Lecture and Awards Ceremony. And the Eldredge Prize for Distinguished Scholarship in American Art is an award we give out annually. And it honors my predecessor, Charles C. Eldredge, who was director here. Some of you may know him from his important time here, from 1982 to 1988. 6 years, brief but brilliant 6 years. As I get to my 6-year mark, I'm amazed at how much he did and how much more I need to do to try to catch up. He, of course, we know him from his leadership at the University of Kansas as a great American scholar. And in his time here at SAM, he promoted scholarship through many channels, channels that we are delighted to continue and enhance. For example, our award-winning exhibitions, our notable premier and leading fellowship program, importantly, the American Art Journal, something he founded in 1987. We also thank the American Art Forum Patrons Support Group for underwriting this Eldredge Prize. So why is this prize important? I think we know it intuitively, but it's important to remind ourselves that scholarly writing in art history plays such a critical role in advancing our field. And these awards recognize and reward excellence in research, writing, and scholarship. And we're interested in promoting innovation, groundbreaking work, and always encouraging scholars to push boundaries of what is known, existing knowledge, as well as new avenues of inquiry. I hope you like the sound of that. I got that from AI, chatbot GPT, when I put in the importance of scholarship in American art. But I don't think AI could write the kind of book that we are celebrating tonight, because it really requires focus, originality, and thoroughness. So good for us. How, you might wonder, is this prize selected? Because we had very diligent jurors, 3 individuals I want to recognize, as we had over 24 nominated texts to consider. We are grateful to Elizabeth Hutchinson, who serves as Associate Professor of American Art History at Barnard College of Columbia University, to Laura Kina, who serves as the Vincent de Paul Professor at the Art School at DePaul University, and of course to Nizan Shaked, Professor of Contemporary Art History, Museum and Curatorial Studies at California State University at Long Beach. And she herself, Nizan, is the winner of the 31st Annual Eldredge Prize winner, so she knows what she's looking for in terms of somebody of the caliber of our honoree today. Vivien Green-Fried is an extraordinary scholar, and her book, Against Our Will, Sexual Trauma in America Since 1970, is an important book. When it came to my attention, I thought immediately, we need this book. We need this scholarship. However relevant is this for us to consider? Her book was published in 2019 by Penn State University Press, a press we hold in high regard. And more of the impressive background of Dr. Freed will be shared by my esteemed colleague who overcomes every obstacle to be with us today. I believe she jumped with joy when this was announced. So without further ado, Robin Wieder is the terrific executive director of the American Art Journal. Robin, tell us a little bit more.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And thank you to all of you who are joining us. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Freed, to share some of the jury's remarks on why they selected this book for the Eldredge Prize, and to give you, Vivien, this certificate honoring your accomplishment. Please come up. A little housekeeping. So the lecture is being recorded and will be posted on the museum's YouTube channel. So ringers off and screens dark, everyone, please. The lecture will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A. If at that point you have questions, please line up at one of the microphones there. And then we'll have a reception in the lobby as well. Vivien Green-Freed is Professor Emerita in the History of Art and Architecture Department at Vanderbilt University, where she was on the faculty for 35 years and much loved for her mentorship of both students and junior faculty, which the university recognized by giving her the Margaret Cunningham Women's Center Mentoring Award in May 2020. In addition to her commitment to service at Vanderbilt and collaborative work with museums and professional organizations, she's a prolific author. She has published on a variety of topics in exhibition catalogs, edited collections, and peer-reviewed journals, among them American Art, Art Bulletin, 19th Century Art Worldwide, Panorama, and Winterthur Portfolio, and she's the author of 3 books. In 2003, she published Art and the Crisis of Marriage, Georgia O'Keeffe and Edward Hopper. Before that, Art and Empire, The Politics of Ethnicity in the U.S. Capitol, 1815 to 1863. That came out in 1992, and then, by popular demand, was reprinted in 2001. At present, Dr. Freed is writing a book on Henry Ries's photographs of Berlin's iconic buildings and monuments from 1937 to 2004. The book we are here to honor is called Against Our Will, Sexual Trauma in American Art Since 1970. Freed credits the book's conceptualization to the period of 2008 to 10, when she was developing, along with other scholars, an exhibition and catalog about the women's building in Los Angeles. In the same period, she immersed herself in trauma theory in her role as the director and Spence and Rebecca Webb Wilson Fellow of the year-long Trauma Studies program at the Robert Penn Warren Center for the Humanities at Vanderbilt University. These come together beautifully in the book, which will give you a sense of tonight. But first, I want to reiterate the museum's gratitude to the Eldredge Prize jury members, Elizabeth Hutchinson, Laura Kina, and Nizan Shaked, and to share with you some excerpts from their letter of commendation. They wrote, Dr. Freed's book is a groundbreaking and timely study of sexual violence in American art. Deeply researched and clearly written, this brave and difficult book offers a capacious history and establishes a foundation for understanding contemporary work that continues in this tradition, thereby inviting art historians working in all periods to confront the damaging tradition of silence around sexual violence. As a contribution to U.S. American art history, Freed's book represents the academic rigor, historical understanding, and relevance that characterize the highest achievements in our field. We are honored to award the Eldredge Prize to Vivien Green-Freed for this courageous work of scholarship.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you so much, Robin and Stephanie, and for all of you being here today. It is an honor to be awarded this year's Charles C. Eldredge Prize for Outstanding Scholarship in the Field of American Art for Against Our Will, Sexual Trauma in American Art since 1970, and to join my esteemed colleagues who similarly have won this award. I would like to thank the Smithsonian American Art Museum for inviting me to present a talk about my book, and the jurors of the Eldredge Prize for recognizing the relevance of its topic, its deep research, clear writing, and methodology. I also want to thank my friends from high school, from graduate school, from Vanderbilt, from yoga, and colleagues, some of whom I've known for almost 40 years, and others not as long as that, for their support and encouragement during the years I worked on this manuscript. My intention in writing this book, like that of the artists I discuss, was to take strategic action of working through, bearing witness, and ending the silence about sexual violence. Those who read my book and listen to this talk become witnesses, just as I performed the role of a witness in writing the book, which was a strategic, personal, political, and professional decision. I did not know when I began working on this project in 2001 that by the time it would be published, the subject would be timely because of the Me Too movement, which blossomed on social media in 2017. It became a well-known hashtag of rage against sexual harassment and assault as more and more women, men, non-binary, and trans people began to speak out to end the silence and demand justice. Against Our Will shows that such clarion calls, however, had been embodied in the visual arts for decades. Given the subject of my book, my talk will contain disturbing content and images. This lecture will amplify the voices of survivors of sexual violence, and the presentation contains mature content, including depictions of physical and sexual violence. If any of you in the audience, either remotely or in the auditorium, anticipate that this content might be re-traumatizing or provoke secondhand trauma, you may not want to interact with the content. Last year, Cherise Smith said about her winning the Eldredge Prize for her book, Michael Ray Charles, A Retrospective, that it was a remarkable achievement as the first book about a living African-American artist to garner this award. I hope Cherise does not mind that I appropriate her words. In my case, the award is a remarkable achievement because first, I retired over 2 years ago, which is hard to believe. I thus consider this award to be the pinnacle of my career. Second, Against Our Will is both the first feminist art history book to win the prize and the second to address gender and sexuality. Third, the jurors awarded the prize to a book that focuses on a difficult topic, that of sexual violence, one that was initially dismissed and often remained silenced. As I explain in my introduction and repeat here, and I quote, "While conceptualizing this book, I sent a query to the listserv for historians of American art, searching for information about artists who address the subject of rape. One responder wondered with dismay if I was serious, asking, 'What has the world of art history come to that such a book might be necessary?' Although some agree that the project is long overdue, several of my interlocutors, whether art historians, scholars in other fields, or non-academics, have expressed surprise and sometimes distress over what they perceive to be an unusual and disturbing scholarly endeavor. Some ask how I could focus on such a topic without feeling overwhelmed and depressed. Still others want to know how I became interested in the topic in the first place. Clearly, even academics who are ostensibly open to inquiry are taken aback when sexual violence, rape, and incest in U.S. culture are juxtaposed with art and representation. Resistance also appeared among some of the artists covered in this book, who refused permission to quote them based on interviews in person or by email, and declined to authorize published illustrations of their work. My study thus was initially rebuffed or misunderstood, but cultural shifts over the last decade now make it possible to confront and engage with these matters, difficult as they may remain for scholars of art, for museum goers in the public, for some artists themselves, and for those who have long regarded art as an aesthetically pure domain that transcends such matters as sexual violence. Against Our Will covers many artists and themes. Although a daunting task to condense arguments of any book manuscript, I have selected the following 5 topics for my talk today: an explanation of my overarching argument, my methodology and use of trauma theory, the performances of Suzanne Lacy, Leslie Labowitz, and Emma Sulkowicz, considerations of ways to teach and curate challenging art historical subjects, and the Me Too movement and its aftermath. Before launching into these topics, I first would like to dedicate this talk to my former student, Kate McSpadden, whose work is included in Against Our Will, and her family is here today. She had participated in the course that I had taught in 2006 with Judy Chicago and her husband, Donald Woodman, at Vanderbilt University. In Against Our Will, I discuss and reproduce 2 paintings that Kate had created, Astringent on the left and Rocked Shut as a Seashell on the right. In both, she rendered the figure as a self-portrait in the same colors as the setting, creating not only a sense of merging with the environment as if losing her individuality, but also as a ghost-like presence. She in fact thought of herself as a phantom while involved with the project because of her at times debilitating memories of personal experiences with sexual assault and rape. She realized, and I quote, "The act of transferring the memories of the events from the sealed recesses of my brain out onto the canvas and in public allowed me to exorcise these ghosts who had previously lived only inside me, and to give them their own physical embodiment in the world and at large," close quote. In Astringent, the sense of ruptures, dislocations, incompleteness, and dissymmetry, and the contrast between 2- and 3-dimensionality convey the woman's emotional fragmentation and woundedness as she compulsively attempts to clean her body. Kate tragically passed away at the age of 40 shortly after I had learned of winning this award. And she will always, always be in my memory and in my heart. In Against Our Will, I examine how and why feminist artists, working from the 1970s to the second decade of the 21st century, represented and challenged the dominant narrative about sexual violence. I demonstrate that for over 40 years, a key group of artists in the US has insisted upon ending the silence and contributed to an anti-rape, anti-incest counter-narrative. I address this as an anti-rape and anti-incest cycle. I employ the term cycle to designate a unifying idea, that of sexual trauma, and repetition over an extended time frame by various artists within different historical contexts and geographical locations in the United States. Both second and third wave feminist artists, such as Yoko Ono, Nancy Spiro, Hannah Wilke, Faith Ringgold, Judy Chicago, Suzanne Lacy, Leslie Labowitz, Anna Mendieta, Ida Applebrood, Lorna Simpson, Sue Coe, Kara Walker, Kate McSpadden, and Emma Sulkowicz, to name some included in my book, have challenged sexual violence in U.S. culture through their art. Specific themes emerge from the artists whose works I address: rape and incest against women, rape and incest against men, rape and pornography, and incest and lesbianism. In Against Our Will, I will use, In Against Our Will, I will use trauma theory. Here we go. In Against Our Will, I use trauma theory to shed light on what motivated the artist to speak the unspeakable and to make public the crimes of rape, incest, and domestic violence. This theoretical framework, which evolved from the topic itself, combines social and political concerns with psychological and sexual ones. In his studies of shell shock and neuroses, Sigmund Freud, at the end of the 19th century, first formulated the modern study of trauma as an emotionally stressful and catastrophic experience that wounds the body and mind. It emerged as a distinct scholarly discipline in the 1970s when some scholars, especially in the humanities, used it for analyses of historical texts. Trauma studies spread widely in response to the recognition of post-traumatic stress disorders codified in 1980 by clinical psychiatrists. They identified the following symptoms that survivors of sexual violence, the Holocaust, the Vietnam War, among others, share: numbing, detachment, extreme fear, hypervigilance, depression, exaggerated startle responses, flashbacks, a sense of helplessness, and nightmares. Significantly, many practicing clinicians and leading theorists in the field of trauma studies are women who identify themselves as feminists. To a significant degree, trauma theory resulted from second-wave feminist full-scale assault on sexual secrets. Feminism and sexual trauma are bound in theory, clinical practice, and, as my book shows, in visual culture. The repetitive nature of trauma is central to most trauma theorist discussions. Some consider the repetition of trauma to be about repeated acts of violence. But, as Kathy Carruth explains, and I quote, "Trauma is not locatable in the simple violent or original event in an individual's past, but rather in the way that its very unassimilated nature, the way it is precisely not known in the first instance, returns to haunt the survivor later on." Bessel van der Kolk elaborates, and again I quote, "The trauma may be over, but it keeps being replayed and continually recycling memories in an reorganized nervous system." Sorry. Okay. It jumps forward. The works of art that I discuss thus confront, represent, reenact, and negotiate trauma, creating a counter-narrative anti-rape and anti-incest cycle that was recirculated. The artists deliberately and strategically address individual, collective, transgenerational, vicarious, and/or emphatic trauma to reconstitute individual subjectivity, master traumatic loss, and, in some cases, as with Kate McSpadden, recover. Kara Walker, on the other hand, does not convey a sense of recovery or closure in her works. Against this background, the artists discussed in this book worked hard to free survivors from the status of victim. Trauma theory argues that listeners to trauma, often in a therapeutic setting, become witnesses, albeit belated ones, enabling the person to provide a testimony. Silence, not speaking, perpetuates trauma's ability to disrupt and wound an individual psyche. Providing testimony verbally and/or visually, on the other hand, enables traumatized individuals to gain a critical distance from the past and the possibility of coming to terms with trauma. Wounds, however, often cannot heal without leaving scars or residues from the past. That is, the after effects of trauma. The witness helps give shape to what once seemed overwhelming and incomprehensible, creating a collective memory and history. This concept is important in understanding many of the artists considered in this book, who often work through trauma by way of their art with the intention of recovery and hopefully inspiring action on the part of viewers to prevent further occurrences. The artworks, installations, and exhibitions establish repetitive traumatic sites, representations, and stories that surround, involve, and challenge the viewer to witness, acknowledge, and remember sexual trauma. This was a political intervention as well as an artistic decision. These artists subverted the norm of the so-called heroic rape tradition of Western art. Beginning in the Renaissance, painting and sculpture in this mold elided the reality of physical violation against women to produce spectacles of pleasure that also involve pain and forbidden desire. For example, Titian's Rape of Europa, dating from 1560 to 1562, depicts the ancient Greek myth in which Zeus turned himself into a bull to abduct Europa and bring her to Crete. There, he revealed his identity and raped her, resulting in the birth of 3 children. In Titian's rendering, he depicted Europa as an eroticized woman as they fly away into the sky. The painting's playful cupids, dynamic composition, and rich colors belie the fact that Zeus is about to rape Europa. Faith Ringgold's slave rape series number 3, Fight to Save Your Life, dating from 1972, counters this heroic rape tradition and exemplifies how trauma theory applies to an artwork. Ringgold depicted a black, pregnant, naked woman who gazes directly at the viewer, caressing and protecting her pregnant belly and fetus with her right hand and holding a hatchet in the other. Ringgold embodied in the painting the African woman's surprise, fear, and paralysis. She is poised between freedom and enslavement while being chased by an unseen slave trader. Subsequent quilts show smaller figures overwhelmed by the landscape, terrorized and immobilized, attempting to flee away, as seen in this subset named Run, You Might Get Away. This is followed by depictions of women fighting off their captors in Fight to Save Your Life, and then in assisting one another in Help Your Sister. Although none of the images represent an actual act of rape, the title, Slave Rape Series, suggests that a slave trader has indeed already raped this woman. This resulted in her pregnancy, as manifest in these works in the series. It predicts that other women, once enslaved, will also be subjected to sexual violation. In Slave Rape Series number 3, Fight to Save Your Life, Ringgold created a commanding image who is both a victim and an avenger with weapon who contests the power relationships between rapist and victim. This results in a counter-narrative of rape revenge as one means of recovery. In related panels, Ringgold showed not the enslaved person attempting to escape from captivity, but the enslaver, who you can see in the far left. Yeah, the pointer is not working. You can see in the far left in all 3 of these works wearing white pants. You can see his leg as he's running away. The enslaver is dodging the wrath of the power and weapon-holding women. Ringgold in this series embodies both individual trauma and the raped woman of her child, who will also be enslaved. She conveys transgenerational trauma as a family inheritance. By creating 19 quilts in this series, Ringgold established a rape crisis cycle that reenacts the nature of trauma's continual reiteration. In the 1970s, Suzanne Lacey and Leslie Labowitz, often in collaboration with one another as well as with others, created at least 7 large-scale, and complex public performances in Los Angeles. These helped redefine rape as a crime of aggression against and power over women. They launched a new direction in art that became foundational and iconic because their works were reperformed and re-exhibited, reproduced, and discussed in exhibition catalogs into the first decades of the 21st century. Lacey established what she called new genre public art that is socially engaged and an interactive cultural practice that deploys a range of traditional and non-traditional media in public spaces for public audiences. Activism, education, and theory intersect in this art form. 3 Weeks in May, a 3-week multimedia series of activities and artworks that began on Mother's Day in 1977, was an extraordinary event in its diversity, complexity, and range of activities and artworks. Lacey's performances and installation, She Who Would Fly, as part of 3 Weeks in May, enabled 3 to 4 visitors at a time to enter a small gallery. A lamb carcass with white feathered wings suspended between floor and ceiling confronted them. In Christian iconography, the lamb symbolizes Christ in the role of collective sacrifice and as a mute victim. Here, the animal carcass literally represented sacrifice, in this case, of a sexually violated person. Women's testimonies of rape were pinned to their corresponding locations on maps that covered the wall. Readers of the stories at some point realized that 4 nude women, stained in red grease paint, crouched like vultures above the door, watching them. Rather than function as objects of desire, which can be seen in Titian's Venus of Urbino, dating from 1532 to 1534, the women in She Who Would Fly subverted the masculine spectator's gaze. The predatory and grotesque women above the door alternatively fascinated, repelled, attracted, and horrified audience members because of their bruised and bloodied bodies. The viewers, nevertheless, watched over the female spectators to protect them from further violation and over male spectators to create what Lacey called forced empathy, a moment of recognition, which was the central aesthetic point, shock. The installation created a viscerally difficult environment, challenging viewers to become emphatic witnesses. 3 Weeks in May centered on Lacey's installation maps, in which she marked 2 bright yellow maps of Los Angeles located downstairs in City Mall Plaza. On the first map, she stenciled the word rape in 4-inch red letters over every location where a woman had been raped over a 3-week period. She updated the map daily using data from the Los Angeles Police Department. On the second map, she highlighted the locations of prevention centers, rape hotlines, hospital emergency rooms, and crisis and counseling centers. I do want to emphasize that at this particular point in the 1970s, having prevention centers, having hotlines, having counseling centers, that was really new. That had not existed previously. The first map literally located sites of traumatic history, while the second mapped the sites of assistance and resistance. Passers-by checking out the maps, whether they were City Hall employees, tourists, or shoppers, were instantly exposed to the overwhelming number of rapes that had occurred in the city. They also learned about the resources available to assist survivors. Many of the activities connected with 3 Weeks in May consisted of repeated actions like stamping the map or writing and reading testimonies. These mimic the repetitive nature of trauma, such as the recurring intrusive thoughts in which survivors may feel as if they are reliving the assault. This characteristic response to trauma, repetition, also occurred in Mourning and in Rage, also performed in 1977. It was a collaboration between Lacey and Labowitz under the aegis of the Women's Building, in which many artists associated with that organization participated. In Mourning and in Rage did not create an oral testimony closely connected to the experience of survivors, as some aspects of 3 Weeks in May, but instead was a feminist public performance to memorialize the ongoing serial killings by the so-called Hillside Strangler. He had raped and murdered 10 women in Los Angeles. Newspapers and magazines reported that the victims had been found in hillside areas around Los Angeles, nude, strangled, and raped. The media noted disapprovingly that many of the women who were prostitutes had come from broken homes and lower-class backgrounds. Newspaper reports implied that their professions not only contributed to urban sleaze, but also led to their rapes and murders. Designed for an audience of reporters and the public, In Mourning and in Rage included participants from the Rape Hotline Alliance, the Los Angeles City Council, families of survivors, and women from the community. It took place in front of Los Angeles City Hall in December 1977. 70 women gathered at the Women's Building and filled 22 cars. Led by a hearse and 2 motorcycle escorts, the motorcade traveled to City Hall, where media crews and members of the City Council waited. Each car bore stickers, funeral, and stop violence against women. The funeral procession circled the building twice. Out of the hearse climbed 9 7-foot-tall women, robed in black with headdresses shaped like coffins, and a tall woman clothed in red with a scarlet headband. These women, signifying the 10 killed to date by the Hillside Strangler, formed a procession 2 abreast, walking toward the steps in front of City Hall. Simultaneously, women from the motorcade positioned themselves on either side of the steps. They unfurled 2 banners designed to fit the television screen, which read, "In memory of our sisters, we fight back." The first mourner walked to the microphone and proclaimed in an even yet impassioned voice, "I am here for the 10 women who have been raped and strangled between October 18th and November 29th. The chorus chanted, "In memory of our sisters, we fight back." The woman in scarlet then wrapped the first mourner in a red shawl. Each of the subsequent speakers read a statement that connected the seemingly random incident of violence in Los Angeles with the greater picture of nationwide violence toward women. They too received a red cloak. In Mourning and in Rage echoes Ringgold's slave rape series number 3 in its powerful counter-narrative of rape revenge. Lacey and Labowitz self-consciously created what they called activist political art that involves social analysis, which is a strategy for audience involvement. They invited others to join in the protest and to demand changes in the legal system and to similarly judge the news media. They transformed a civic public space into a site for grief, mourning, and remembrance. By speaking on behalf of the murdered and violated women in Los Angeles and other places throughout the United States, the participants created a site of memory, testimony, and belated witnessing. The insistent repetition throughout the performance of the phrase, "I am here," reaffirmed the presence of the subject as witness. The public also bore witness through the media. As in 3 Weeks in May, the repetitive format in Mourning and in Rage, its repeated phrases and ritual actions, cloaked speakers, and echoing chorus-like theatrical format reenacted the tendency of recurrence in a trauma victim's behavior or psyche. Videographers recorded the event. This video, a vehicle for testimony, created an act of bearing witness to unspeakable accounts that had formerly been silenced. Video was a new experimental medium at that time, black and white, produced in portable reel-to-reel equipment and edited with a tape splicer. Through flickering light, discontinuous and grainy images, and scratchy sound, the destructive narratives of the video evoke the disruption of lived experiences and psychic coherence associated with trauma. At the same time, these nicks and scratches function as reminders of historical materiality. Now available on YouTube, this performance is still relevant today and available for its continued viewing and witnessing. As a result, it recycles the performance. And I do want to show you, we don't have time to see the whole video, but I do want to show you a little bit of it. Oh, it's not showing the video. I'm seeing it here. Okay. That's not working, so we'll leave that. Okay. You can watch it yourselves on video. Sorry, that's not working. Okay. Pardon me? Oh, there it goes. Okay. Oh, I think, okay. I think we got it now. No?
Okay.
Huh. Well, while he's doing that, I'll just comment that one of the things I point out in my book is that the artists are using media that's non-traditional media. So you're not seeing many paintings. Kate did do paintings. You're seeing video, which at the time, as I said, was brand new. You're seeing performance, which at the time was brand new. There were other kinds, quilts by Ringgold, which is not brand new, but really not seen in quote-unquote high art. Or with Kara Walker, you have silhouettes. So I think maybe we should just skip this and keep going because we don't have a lot of time. There we go. All right. Thank you.
Oops, I shouldn't pause it now. We got it
All right.
rolling.
Thank you. That's Suzanne Lacey putting the cloaks on. You can see how they incorporated the news media. They had contacted the news media to come and document the event. And I'm going to continue because we don't have enough time. As I said, you can definitely see this on YouTube, and if you're interested, I encourage you to go ahead and do that. All right, slideshow. Okay. This is everyone's nightmare. Something going wrong. In the old days, it was your slides. Now it's, what's happening with your PowerPoint. But as I move forward, I'll tell you when I was a graduate student, and I don't know if any of you were in my class when this happened, I was giving a lecture as a TA, and the slide got stuck, and the person was unable to get the slide in, so I ran to the back, like this auditorium, and as I ran back there, I fell out the door. So that was a long time ago. The works by Lacey and Labowitz recirculated in the first decade of the 21st century. They organized an updated version of 3 Weeks in May, titled 3 Weeks in January, as part of the 2012 Getty's Pacific Standard Time Art in LA, dating from 1945 to 1982. Once again, Lacey created a rape map, this time installing it outside the Los Angeles Police Department's Deaton Auditorium. Although the map indicated that the number of rapes had decreased in the last 35 years, it showed that sexual violence remained a problem, especially in high schools and on college campuses. Additional venues enabled Lacey's and Labowitz's works to be recirculated on the West Coast. Lacey exhibited the original 3 Weeks in May maps at the Geffen Contemporary MoCA in Los Angeles in 2011-2012. 7 years later, in 2019, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art held Lacey's first scale retrospective, We Are Here, which included many of the works I discuss in my book, once again recycling them. And I want to make a comment that Lacey's first retrospective was in 2019. Judy Chicago's first retrospective was at the De Young Legion of Honor in San Francisco in 2001-2002. And Faith Ringgold had her first retrospective in her 80s at the New Museum in New York City in 2022. It's taken some time. Other artists followed Lacey's and Labowitz's lead, most notably Emma Sulkowicz, a visual arts major at Columbia University, became a national figure for her performance, Mattress Performance, Carry That Weight, dating from 2014 to 2015. During her sophomore year at Columbia University, Sulkowicz reported to university officials that she had been raped. After a university committee found her alleged assailant innocent, she spoke out by way of a performance. Over an 8-month period during her senior year, she carried a dormitory mattress like the one on which she had been raped to her classes and even to her graduation. The mattress signifies the burden of the after effects of Sulkowitz's own trauma. It also conveyed her protest of Columbia's refusal to find her alleged perpetrator guilty of sexual assault and to suspend him. Other students joined her at Columbia University and other colleges to further protest against rape on college campuses, and Vanderbilt was included in this. They all condemned their own institutions for the unsatisfactory ways in which some refused to adequately cover and investigate rapes on campuses. Now it's stuck. Next. All right. Is this a nightmare? Is this a nightmare? Okay. No, it's not a nightmare. It's still going. How can art historians teach this material, and how can museum curators exhibit such challenging subjects? When I discussed works that address sexual abuse in my classes, I encouraged those who might have found the material difficult to skip the lecture. I would often see expressive facial cues that indicated which students had experienced abuse or assault. I encouraged that person to seek therapeutic assistance if they had not done so previously. Some of those students not only chose to stay in class, but also became the most invested and vocal in discussions, often sharing personal experiences and tying them to art in profound ways. I also provide resources to consult, such as Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, or RAIN, and the Sexual Assault Center in Nashville. It is not possible for curators of such difficult subjects to do this for museum visitors, although they could follow the example of Paula Lombard and Leslie Belt, who curated the one-month exhibition about incest in Bedtime Stories, which opened at the Women's Building in Los Angeles on October 19, 1979. Performances took place surrounded by drawings and sculptures. These derive from workshops coordinated by several groups, including Daughters United, an incest therapy group within the Los Angeles Department of Public Services. The curators arranged for Sandra Butler, the author of one of the first books about incest published in 1978, to speak on opening night. The Women's Information and Skills Project of the Gay Community Services Center provided referrals and therapists as well as support groups. The organizers wore name tags so they could be approached for emotional support or find a quiet space to cry, think, or just be alone. Including a therapist and recognizing that the exhibition might trigger the after effects of incest or vicarious trauma was insightful and novel, especially for the time of 1979. More recently, I served on a committee with other professors from local universities, including Rebecca Van Diver at Vanderbilt, and those from Belmont University and the HBCUs Fisk and Tennessee State. We joined the Sexual Assault Center and other Nashville organizations to provide recommendations to assist attendees to view and interpret disturbing images in the exhibition at the Frisk Museum of Art, Kara Walker, Cut to the Quick. It has traveled to other places such as the Cincinnati Art Museum, Museum of Contemporary Art in Jacksonville. It will be opening at Virginia MoCA and later USC Fisher Museum of Art. And my understanding is that each place is using what we have suggested be used to help viewers in this exhibition. The co-curators at the Frisk Museum of Art, Susan Edwards, then director of the museum, and Sienna Roos, a Nashville African-American poet, planned trigger warnings and activities derived from our discussions. At the beginning of the exhibition and on the internet, the following warning states, as you see here, this exhibition contains mature content, including depictions of physical and sexual violence. A video opened the exhibition in which Heather Finch, professor of English at Belmont University, LaTanya Reese Rogers, professor of literature and drama at Fisk University, and I made comments to prepare viewers. Rouse wrote poems inspired by specific images in the exhibition, which could be found on signage and heard on the audio tour. Programs and interpretation allowed visitors to reflect on the themes in Walker's art. It offered opportunities for creative responses and provided support to any for whom the work triggered trauma or post-traumatic anxiety. The museum also had a reflection room with a guided meditation led by a licensed professional therapist. I recognized while completing the final revisions of Against Our Will in 2017 that a convergence of historic moment, the Me Too movement, with my scholarly project existed. The public response to the Me Too movement and resultant tsunami of first-person testimonies has a history that began during the 1960s and the 1970s in conjunction with the second wave feminist movement. Later artists often framed their works within the visual and rhetorical tradition established by earlier foundational artists, such as Lacey and Labowitz. To fully understand the breakthrough these artists helped to engineer, one must consider the current state of the dialogue about sexual violence. The artworks considered in my book took a taboo subject and inaugurated a public discussion that is currently front and center in political life, organized religion, journalism, educational institution, sports, Hollywood, and the military. Their relentless art production to end the silence about sexual violence reverberates in the Me Too movement today. Judge Rosemary Aquilina proclaimed in 2018, upon sentencing ex-USA gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar for his egregious serial abuse of female minors and young adults, "It stops now. Speak out like these survivors. Become part of that army." More than 150 female athletic voices, including U.S. Olympian gymnasts Simone Biles, Allie Reisman, and Gabby Douglas, had become part of that army. They had joined the hundreds of survivors of sexual abuse who have stepped forward since the dawn of the Me Too movement. The feminist artists, however, discussed in my book, were on the front lines, bravely speaking out to end the silence when few address the persistently taboo subjects about domestic violence, rape, and incest. I encourage all of us to join that army, to end the silence by making sexual trauma known and knowable, and by giving voice to the voiceless. I also encourage other scholars to continue examining this subject, not only in the United States, but also globally. More art and writing remains to be done. Thank you.